Wall Street ends sharply lower in overnight session, with the Dow slumping over 600 points amid concerns about heightened speculative trading. Asian markets also off to a weak start. Apple reported its largest revenue on record at $111.4 billion for the first quarter. Sales for every product category rose by double-digit percentage points. The stock, however, ended lower in trade. To speed up the sale of distressed assets, veteran banker Uday Kotak says the time is right for multiple bad banks with an AIF structure. Adds that India must bite the bullet on increasing public shareholding in PSU banks. Says that a bank holding company with 51% government ownership may serve in cases where the government believes retaining ownership is crucial. FMCG major HUL reported an inline set of Q3 earnings with domestic volume growth at 4%, while for Axis Bank it was a mixed performance. Net interest income growth is the slowest in 6 quarters and net interest margins the best in 14 quarters. Hi guys, good morning and welcome to Power Breakfast. In the Mumbai News Center, I'm Pavitra Parekh. Those are all of the headlines that we're tracking this morning. But first up, let's take a look at the global markets. And Asian markets are weak today following that massive sell-off that we saw on Wall Street. So all of the Asian markets are up for you, and it's red across the screen. So Nikkei, you can see, is almost 300 points lower. Shanghai is around 40 points in the red. Hang Seng also around 250 points lower as we speak. The other markets will also come up for you. So take a look at Kospi, Taiwan, the Straits Times. Again, looking really weak over there. Taiwan is 170 points in the red. Straits also trading around 30 points lower, and Kospi is at similar levels, 25 points in the red. The SGX Nifty will also come up for you. Again, you can see that the start for our own markets should be quite weak. It's 82 points lower on the SGX Nifty right now. That's the market action from Asia. Let's also talk about the US then. We saw a brutal sell-off yesterday as profit booking in selectively shorted stocks kept investors on edge. So we saw the Dow fall 600 points. The Nasdaq was 350 points lower when we closed, and the S&P also saw cuts of around 100 points. CNBC's Kate Rooney has all of that action.
U.S. stocks falling sharply on Wall Street. The Dow losing 633 points, the S&P down 98, and the Nasdaq falling 355. The Federal Reserve says it's leaving interest rates unchanged at near zero levels and maintaining its asset purchasing program. This, as the central bank notes, the economic recovery has slowed significantly in recent months. Boeing, meanwhile, lost a record $12 billion last year as the pandemic weighed heavily on aircraft demand. The industrial giant shocked Wall Street with its massive fourth quarter loss and news that it will delay delivery of its new 777X plane until late 2023. Shares falling on that news. That's the action from the U.S. market. Back to you in Mumbai.
All right, Kate, thanks a lot for getting us all of that action. But staying with the U.S. then, the Federal Reserve kept its benchmark interest rate anchored near zero following its two-day meeting. Fed Chair Jerome Powell has reiterated that the policy will remain highly accommodative as the economic recovery progresses. Let's listen in.
Today, we unanimously reaffirmed our statement on longer-run goals and monetary policy strategy, as we typically do each January. As we say in that statement, we view maximum employment as a broad-based and inclusive goal. Our ability to achieve maximum employment in the years ahead depends importantly on having longer-term inflation expectations well anchored at 2%. As the committee reiterated in today's policy statement, with inflation running persistently below 2%, we will aim to achieve inflation moderately above 2% for some time, so that inflation averages 2% over time and longer-term inflation expectations remain well anchored at 2%. We continue to expect it will be appropriate to maintain the current 0 to 1/4% target range for the federal funds rate until labor market conditions have reached levels consistent with the committee's assessment of maximum employment, and inflation has risen to 2% and is on track to moderately exceed 2% for some time. In addition, we will continue to increase our holdings of Treasury securities by at least $80 billion per month and of agency mortgage-backed securities by at least $40 billion per month until substantial further progress has been made toward our maximum employment and price stability goals.
All right, if you're talking about the US, we have to address Apple's earnings, right? They delivered their best ever quarter in terms of revenue as iPhone, wearables, as well as services verticals all set revenue records in the first quarter, leading to the company posting record revenues of over $111 billion. Now, this means a year-on-year growth of 21% for the company. Over 60% of this quarter's revenue came from international markets, while the Indian market saw over 1.5 million shipments of Apple products. This made it the company's best ever quarter in India as well. Apple CEO Tim Cook said that he was gratified by the consumer response to their products across what he said was a historic holiday season for the company. All right, so that's all of the global market action today. But how will all of these overnight cues impact our own markets? We have our research team joining in to take you through the trade setup. Rima, Sonal and Nigel joined me this morning. Hi guys, a very good morning to all of you. Rima, to you first up as always. We were talking about the sell-off on Wall Street, but our own markets also saw a really big sell-off yesterday. How are we looking today?
Absolutely. It was a rough session for our markets, quite a brutal fall. The Nifty ended below that 14,000 level and it's fallen for 4 straight sessions, and in that period we've lost nearly 5.5%. The problem is the FIs have turned sellers in the market. So they sold about 1,688 crore in the cash market, the biggest sell figure by the FIs in the last 4 months, and it's for the 3rd consecutive session that we've seen FIs selling in the cash market, something that we've not seen at least in over 3 months. So that is the problem, that the FIs, which were so optimistic and were pumping copious amounts of money into India, have turned sellers, and that withdrawal of money is hurting. The DIIs also sold, but very, very paltry, just about 3 to 4 crores. The global picture is also not rosy. US futures are down. This is after a 2.5% decline that we saw overnight. The problem is the Indian markets have also started underperforming. So I was just looking at the performance on a YTD basis. Yesterday we highlighted how we've turned negative in 2021. But the other markets like the Korean markets or the Hang Seng, they're all up 7.5% so far this year. So there is a distinct tone of underperformance. The SGX 50 is also suggesting a negative start. There is a futures and options expiry, which could add to some amount of volatility. And of course, it's going to be all about the individual stocks where, earnings have been announced overnight or are likely to today. Back to you.
All right, Rima, thanks a lot for that. Like you pointed out, it will be about the individual stocks. So let's bring in Sonal now, who has that list for us.
A long one at that, Pavitra. Good morning. Let me start with HUL, where the numbers were largely in line with estimates. Volume growth at 4%, in line with estimates of around 4 to 5%. Revenues slightly higher than the poll. EBITDA was slightly short of the poll by 50 crore rupees at 2854 crore rupees, and profits at 1921 crore. That compares with poll of 2050 crore rupees. Moving on to Axis Bank, where NII growth, that was the slowest in 6 quarters. NII grew by 14.5% on a YY basis, 0.6% sequentially. However, net interest margin was the best in 14 quarters at 3.59%. ICICI Prudential Life, the value of new business was at 428 crore versus 400 crore on a sequential basis, and the margins, they were lower on a sequential basis at 25.7%. We have United Spirits that reported numbers yesterday. Revenues were down 3.6% at almost 2,500 crore rupees, which is largely in line with estimates. Profits also went down by 11.2%, but that was higher than the poll. JK Paper, the numbers were weak, quite weak at that. Revenues down 10%, EBITDA down 33%, profits down 50%. PVR in focus because they finally gave the issue price for their QIP, which is at a 2 to 3% discount of the current market price. Aditya Birla Fashion will be acquiring 51% stake in Sabyasachi, and a lot of stocks that will be in focus today because they will be reporting earnings. So watch out for that, for those stocks as well. Back to you.
All right, Sonal, thanks a lot for getting us all of those stocks. We will keep them on our radar today. Finally, over to Nigel. He has all of the cues from the FNO space. Nigel, it is also expiry day today.
Well, it's expiry and things will get very volatile, particularly in the final hour of trade, because the rollovers are more or less in line with what we've seen in the past few months. Remember, in fact, in terms of the Nifty, we've turned negative for the series itself, and also we've turned negative for the year. Keep in mind, in the last few trading sessions, we've corrected nearly around 800 points from the recent peak. The problem is the selling. The FI sold yesterday as well, nearly around 1,700 crores, and that's the highest we've seen in this year itself. And institutions, they remain net sellers. So there is a bit of a buyer strike that's taking place in our own markets. Now, getting into expiry day, when you see 18,000 contracts on the short side, that's not a great sign. And they added closer on 3 shorts for every 1 call in yesterday's trade. in terms of buying, they bought both calls as well as puts, though they bought a higher number of calls. The worrying part, though, is that they're writing calls very, very aggressively. Yesterday as well, they added more than 40,000 contracts on the call side, telling you that at higher levels, we're likely to see some bit of resistance then. What are the levels you're looking at? It seems that the Nifty should be in a bit of a band. That's at least what the bulls will be hoping, because the 50 DMA is around 250 points away from where we close. So on the downside, that's the mark that you should be tracking. While on the upside, the 20 DMA, it seems like a distance away, but a decisive break of any of these levels could easily see the Nifty swing another 300-400 points as well. For starters, though, SGX Nifty is suggesting a bit of a downtake. Back to you.
All right, Nigel, Reema, Sonal, thank you very much for joining us and taking us through the trade setup for the day. With that, it's time for our first break on this show. But up next, we'll get you highlights of the earnings reported by HUL and Axis Bank. Stay tuned for that.